Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the StarCommand podcast. I am David Seymour here with my good friend Alan Bragg, bringing you all things football. Start out in college football, but first, if you would, hit that like and subscribe button, help us out. College football is getting crazy. We have a new number one team in the country. So Quinn Ewers goes down with the injury. Arch Manning steps in and just lights the world on fire. He's going to get his first start this week. Louisiana Monroe's already been talking trash. Their head coach said that they have players over there that have played against Arch in high school and a few of them that have beaten him. And so they're not scared of Arch Manning. We've got FSU has a chance to go 0-4 this week after having an undefeated regular season last week. And really, there is a lot going on. We've got Oklahoma's first ever SEC matchup against Tennessee this week, USC's first in-conference game in the new Big Ten against Michigan this week. Utah is in the Big 12 this week playing this won't be their first game, but they're playing Oklahoma State, who's been the favorite to win the conference ever since realignment started. They are the best of what's left of the original Big 12. So a lot of interesting storylines and things going on in the world of college football today.
Absolutely. Game day is in Norman today. Getting
Yes.
ready. Oklahoma gets to kick off their SEC schedule. First time, SEC game, SEC opener against a hot Tennessee team. Tennessee team that's been a little bit of surprise on both sides of the ball. And it's going to be, I think I think Tennessee is going to handle them. So I think Oklahoma is going to. This will be their, hey, welcome to the SEC moment. But as football, anybody that pays attention to football, there's no surprises if Oklahoma goes in and handles business at home. So that's why we love football.
No, there will be no surprises if Oklahoma does that. They have a rich history at Oklahoma, right? I was listening to the radio before we got on air here, and they were talking about that this is only the second time in 20 years that Oklahoma has been a home underdog.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but there are some incredible storylines to go with this game. You've got
Absolutely.
Josh Heupel, the Tennessee head coach, was the Oklahoma quarterback and eventually the Oklahoma offensive coordinator.
Yeah, won a national championship in '02. That's
Right.
huge, right?
And on that
Can't make this stuff up.
national championship team, Brett Venables, who is now the head coach for OU, was the assistant defensive coordinator of that national championship team. So there is a lot of history between these two coaches, the interchanging of how everything worked. Bob Stoops refusing to talk to the media this week because he didn't want to hear the questions about why he fired Josh to begin with, to hire Lincoln Riley. So it's just a whole wish-wash of things. And I really do think that Tennessee's going to go in and destroy them. I think it opened up at 7.5. It's down to 6.5 now. And I really like, as a matter of fact, we'll get into them later, but that is one of my picks for the week is Tennessee. Oklahoma struggled against Tulane last week. They struggled against UNLV the week before, who almost won that game outright. And I keep hearing all of these stats about Oklahoma's defense, but they haven't played SEC competition yet. And that's what they're going to get today is they're going to get that Southeastern Conference. We're going to hit you in the mouth and run it down your throat football that the Big 12 doesn't offer, that they haven't had to play against, and they haven't played against yet this season, and they've struggled early in the season. And their offense seems anemic. They don't have great wide receiver group. Terry and Arnold, the quarterback that they have over there, he's a turnover machine. He's ranked 132 against 139 qualifiers against the pressure passing. So he's the bottom of the heap of quarterbacks in college football right now. And I think Tennessee's going to be able to go in there and just really handle business in the bright lights and give Oklahoma a real welcome to the SEC.
Yeah, they're Oklahoma should struggle with Tennessee's defense. Tennessee's defense, at least 2 weekends ago, they were tied with Georgia with not allowing a touchdown. And I think it was like 12 quarters. And I can't remember if they gave up a touchdown in the second half of the game they were playing, but they shut out Kent State last week.
Right.
And so they were second only to Georgia, their defense, and not allowing a defensive touchdown. And that's surprise at Tennessee. When no one was it kind of just that stat crept up on me when I saw it on ESPN watching that
Right.
game. So they shut out Kent State. They rolled them last week. They're coming in high, and that defense travels. And I just really think that the defense is going to carry them this week, and it's going to be an exciting game. Look forward to watching them.
Yeah, most definitely. And a couple of the lower stories to watch, right? There were rumblings that Billy Napier was going to get fired last week after starting out 20-0 against Texas A&M, right? Before halftime at home, they're 20-0, down 20-0 against a backup quarterback. And then you've got on the other side of that is Florida State, who started the season undefeated. And remember, I picked Memphis plus the 6.5 and told you I thought that they could win that game outright last week. And they did. FSU is bad. Florida is bad. It's almost a who's going to get fired first. I feel like both of them could get fired after this week. Florida's going to Mississippi State. They're a 6.5-point favorite on the road, and I don't know why. Like that game scares me. I don't know where you give Florida.
It shows you how bad of a state Mississippi State is in, right? I mean, to be at home and getting a wounded Florida team coming in with no confidence, and you're still giving up almost a touchdown. So it just shows you how bad Mississippi State is. We talked about it last week about the two quarterbacks with Napier and
Right.
what to do. And sure enough, he played two quarterbacks. And what did they never have? Rhythm, and never found their groove. They struggled the
Correct.
entire game. They started slow, which we said they cannot do. Can't continue to start slow. And there they are. I think Norvell's going to have a little grace because yes, he did have last year, right? I think that gets him through this year. Another recruiting class. Napier, I don't see it. I don't see him making the year unless they go on a roll. And I don't see anything that lets me know that they're going to go on a 4-game win streak
Right.
and
No.
turn the tide.
Yeah, I'd read a report that the boosters have already raised the money to pay for Billy Napier's buyout. They're ready for him to go. So I don't know that his job's long. I don't think Florida has ever fired a coach in the middle of the season. So he may be.
What's that buyout? Probably like 30 million,
I
40
think it's
million?
26 million
26,
is what I
okay.
saw. But I think he may make it through the season just because Florida doesn't have this history of firing a coach in the middle of the season, unless they go in and lose today. If he goes in and drops this game as a 7-point road favorite to Mississippi State, he may get fired before they get back to Gainesville. And then the other coach is Mike Norvell over at FSU. He had steady improvement for his first 3 years in FSU. And then last year he goes completely undefeated in the regular season. They miss out on the college playoff. And we talked about it at the beginning of the season, this hangover of when things go wrong for you in that instance, this dark cloud that kind of sits over your program. And Billy Napier is experiencing, or not Billy Napier, but Mike Norvell's experiencing that up in FSU. He went out trying to struggle to replace players that left, and I don't know that he got the right ones because they are sitting at 0-3. They've lost to Georgia Tech, Boston College, and Memphis, which Georgia Tech's not a great football program. Boston College is rebuilding and hired a coach on the fly because their head coach left to be the defensive coordinator of the Green Bay Packers after recruiting season right before spring practice was supposed to start. So they've got a brand new head coach that hasn't really even had time to recruit his own players. He's working with whatever he was given. And don't get me wrong, Bill O'Brien is a great head coach. But to get kind of thrown into that situation with having to figure everything out on the fly real quick right before the season's going to start, and then a Memphis team that's a group of 5 team, your losses aren't even 2 good teams. It's not like you're losing to powerhouses and okay, we can excuse this. You're losing to teams that you should beat.
Average
Right.
programs.
Right. Not programs with great history, not any of that. You're losing to, and so I think if he starts 0-4, he could get fired immediately as well. So it'll be really interesting to see how this weekend plays out on both the positive notes. Tennessee program coming back. I mean, they really haven't been a great program since the days of Peyton Manning, and what was the guy that came after Peyton Manning? The Cowboys drafted him. He won the national championship.
I'm drawing a blank.
I am too. But that's the last time
He
that
beat us too in '99 when we had the Sterner fumble. What
Mhm.
was that guy's name? I want to say Carter, but that's Quincy Carter. Dang it, I can't think of it.
I can't T something. It was T Martin.
T. Martin. There you go. T.
Yes.
Martin.
And so, you know, uh it's been that long since Tennessee's really been a continuously relevant program. They've had a couple of splashes here and there, a couple of years ago with Hendon Hooker, they had a really high-powered offense, but they couldn't hold together the defense. And this year with this Nico kid, who is a absolute stud, um, they seem to have the defense to match the offense all of a sudden. And Tennessee is a scary team in the SEC. So and this will kind of really be their first challenge too, right? Playing a big boy program for the first time. And so there's a lot of things to watch. We haven't even gotten to the USC Michigan. USC's opening up their Big Ten schedule against Michigan in the big house. They're a 4.5 point favorite, depending on where you look.
And when you think
And
the last time that Michigan was dogs twice in 1 year at home,
I would love to see what that stat is. If we're talking about Oklahoma,
right?
twice in 20 years, I would love to see what
Because
Michigan's
Michigan's been down before, but
right.
they're not down at home. You think maybe
No,
Ohio State, but they come every other year. And then you'd have to throw in a year where Michigan State was up or Penn State or somebody, or Wisconsin, and maybe he was getting a field goal or a couple points, but I doubt it. That's they could, that's where their season could kind of go in the other direction as well if they don't come in somehow find a way to beat the Pac-12 newbie, right? And the
right,
team that's not supposed to be physical, like comparing it to the Tennessee Oklahoma game. That those Pac-12 teams aren't supposed to be able to go into the Big Ten and be physical and have the defense to compete. Maybe in a bowl game, a one-off, you can go and they can put up some points in January, December. But
right.
here we are, September conference game. Can USC go in there and handle it? I think they can.
I think they can too, only because Michigan is not the Michigan of old, right? They're not even the Michigan of last year. Um, they've got a new head coach, new defensive coordinator, new quarterback. I think you got Loveland is their wide receiver and Edwards is their running back that are really the staples that came from that national title team. And USC's defense is so much different than what it was last year. I watched them against the LSU game where they broke my heart and ruined my ticket, and I've kind of been keeping track of them. And this defense went out and hired a bunch of former defensive coordinators, former NFL coaches, and put together this scheme that seems to be really fitting. And the players have bought into it. They're playing physical, hitting hard, they're stopping the run. And the other half of this is Michigan, right? Whoever the walk-on was that they were starting for the first couple of games is no longer starting. They're bringing in this new quarterback who in his career at Michigan. He's a junior. So in his whole career at Michigan, he is 4 of 7 for 30 yards through the air. He only comes in to run the ball. So if I'm USC, I'm coming in and I'm putting 9, 10, 11 guys. I might put the whole team in the box and dare you to throw the ball.
Absolutely. Wow. Yeah, that's a great stat. They're gonna struggle today.
Right. So and then the other team that I really want to talk about is Miami.
Boy,
They,
absolutely. Just rolling, right? They're on fire.
and I feel like they're doing everything that they can to make sure that Cam Ward wins the Heisman this year because they are not pumping the brakes at all. It does not matter how big they are up, they are rolling,
Yeah,
keeping starters in.
he went for 346, 5 touchdowns. The running back, and that's with the running back having 100 yards, 100 plus yards. AJ Allen, great name by the way.
Yeah,
Uh, 15 yards a carry, 104 yards. That's impressive. They're another one. What they're doing in Tennessee are probably the big surprises, right? Like they're
I
just going handling their business
right.
and really looking good. Um, and
Yeah,
who does
they
Miami have this week?
Miami has South Florida this week.
Okay,
They are a 17-point favorite at South Florida.
should be a good
So,
one.
yeah, yeah, most definitely. And then, so what I found funny last week, right, is I sit down to watch the Texas game and the stat flashes up and it says Quinn Ewers favored to odds on favorite to win the Heisman. And so I immediately text you because he was one of your guys to watch when we did our preview show, the first episode that we did. So I immediately text you. I said, "Oh, you might have been onto something with this Quinn Ewers for the Heisman pick."
Yeah, we gonna call that the StarCommand jinx.
Right. Well, and here's the other thing is that when we had that conversation in our preview show, I said I like Quinn Ewers, but my only problem with him is he doesn't seem to be able to stay healthy. And then halfway through the game, or not even halfway through the game, halfway through the second quarter, he goes down with an abdominal strain and didn't even get hit. And
Hmm.
so I just thought it was wild how all of the points came together in
Yeah,
a matter of
by the time I read the text and was like, oh, and then I tuned in, Manning was in, and I'm like, what's he talking about? Heisman, are you watching this kid?
And now what's crazy about that is that after the showing that Arch Manning had against University of Texas San Antonio and Quinn Ewers being injured, obviously not playing this week, Arch is starting. They actually have the exact same odds to win the Heisman to Arch Manning and Quinn Ewers. And I thought that was an interesting stat that he went from odds-on favorite to having the same exact odds as his
As
backup.
his teammate, yeah.
and and that begs a question, and I've been talking about it with a couple of guys from work and stuff, is what's Texas's plan moving forward when Quinn Ewers comes back from injury, right? Arch Manning is lighting it up, or he lit it up last week. We shouldn't say he is lighting it up because he played relief duty last week. This will be his first collegiate start today. And this was my answer to the question when everybody asked this, because they all know that I'm a Texas fan. My answer to the question is if Quinn Ewers is ready to go next week, and the only teams that Arch Manning's played against are the University of Texas San Antonio and Louisiana Monroe. No matter how much he lights it up, if those are the only two teams he's played against, you bring Quinn Ewers back. Now, if you get into the SEC schedule and he's playing anybody like Georgia or Florida, even though Florida's down, but any of these actual SEC schools in conference play, and he starts rolling them the way that he's rolling everybody else, I almost feel like you have to stay with the hot hand at that point because he's proven himself against the bigger talent.
Sure. If it's almost an unwritten rule in sports from playing and just being around it my whole life is you don't lose your starting position due to injury.
Right.
There's also you got to feel the pulse of the locker room and the momentum, and it's one of those things. If Manning comes out and just lights it up, you have to have that conversation. Again, if yours is the less time that Quentin misses, the better, because
Right.
that's the less momentum that Arch is able to build, right?
Right.
But you typically never lose to an injury, lose your spot to an injury. But there's also, hey, this kid's hot, we're gonna ride him and ride the momentum. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
I found the LSU Carolina game very interesting.
Yeah.
LSU was able to stay alive with their hopes of the playoff, and they outscored South Carolina 20-9 that second half. And I thought South Carolina was going to pull that out.
I did too. I was hoping that they would. But I did take them with the points, and that turned out to be a pretty good pick. So yeah, I found that game interesting as well. That LSU was able to finally win one of those close knit, tough games and be able to come from behind and do so. I think that's been the knock on Brian Kelly's LSU team since he's gotten there is when it gets tight, when it gets down to the wire, or we've got to have a play to win this. They've not been able to make that play, and they did that a lot of last week. Now, some of that was that the South Carolina quarterback got injured, and they had to bring in a backup that really did an actually phenomenal job for being his first game time action. But that being said, LSU was still able to make the plays that they needed to make to be able to get back into that ball game and eventually win that ball game. And that's not something that a Brian Kelly LSU team has been able to do up to this point. So I do find that interesting. They were able to keep their playoff hopes alive because
Absolutely, it was a very
it's
big win for them.
yeah,
Um,
new year, we have the 12 team playoff, so all you got to do is be in the top 12.
yeah,
So
you obviously cannot afford two losses early in the season and be chasing the rest of the season. You can
right.
have that one early. I think you can have that one late once you've proven, or maybe just have one. The SEC schedule is brutal. If they would have lost that game, I would count them out.
Yeah.
I mean, they pretty much have to run the table, and that's not happening in the SEC.
No, and it would have counted them out because not only did you lose to a non-conference team in USC, but then you lost to a weaker SEC team. A lot of the talk is that the weakest SEC team is better than any Pac-12 team, any Big 12 team. I don't know that that's always the case because Vanderbilt's probably the worst SEC team, and I don't know who they're better than. Maybe some Group of Fives or FCS teams, but in the FBS, South Carolina is in that lower echelon of the SEC.
Excuse me.
So, that being said, if you lose to a non-conference team and a lower echelon SEC team, you might as well go ahead and count yourself out of the playoffs. So by having that grindy, gritty win, that gives you some added juice too, right? Oh, if they get into a close one, because it's apparent after last year that one of the biggest things that the college football playoff committee is looking at is not just where you rank or what your schedule is, but the eye test, right? Because the eye test is what kept FSU out of the playoff last year. It was, we don't think that you can compete. We don't know that the game that you're going to play is going to be interesting enough for us to put you in the college football playoff without Jordan Travis. So since he's gone, even though you're undefeated and you're a conference champion, we're going to keep you out and let these two one-loss conference champion teams in. So the eye test matters. So LSU's ability to have this gritty, grimy, come from behind, punch you in the mouth when it counts win helps the eye test.
100%. 100%. I want to touch base on big game, not this weekend. This weekend, two of the big dogs have a bye, and that's
Yes,
Alabama and Georgia.
correct.
And of course, Alabama went and did their thing. Wisconsin, great call on your part. They were too much for them. That's two SEC schools have traveled to Big Ten schools this year and have dominated. Great for the SEC.
Yeah,
Texas did their thing in the big house, and then Alabama just went and rolled Wisconsin 42-10.
yeah.
And then Georgia could have
Ooh,
could have taken the air out of that game next weekend if they didn't pull that off in Lexington. Um, Georgia was held to just 262 total yards. Kentucky had 284. Kentucky got outgained them in
Yeah,
yards. Um, I think that as a huge wake up call. You look at what Kirby Smart said after the game being interviewed. He said, "We got a lot of stuff on tape we can work on now."
yeah.
So not only that, he's got 2 weeks with these kids to
Oof.
tell them everything they did wrong, how that they haven't been touching that line as many times, and their shirts aren't tucked in. He's going to be on them. So I
Yeah.
expect that. And Alabama's just building confidence. So I really expect that game with these having 2 weeks to prepare. What a game
Oh,
uh,
that's
next
yeah.
weekend.
Yeah, it's going to be a great game. Kentucky blew that game. They didn't
Yes, they
lose
did.
that game. They had an opportunity to go forward on a fourth down, keep the ball. They'd been moving the ball well against that Georgia defense. And as much as they were stopping Georgia, there just wasn't enough time on the clock for you to play defense and hope to get the ball back, right?
Right.
I do think that in Athens, Georgia, there is reason to be concerned. You had a slow start against Clemson. Yeah, you came out in the second half and blew the doors off of them. Had a great cupcake game in week 2 and blew that one out. And then last week you have this Kentucky game where you have a team that's come to play in Lexington in the Kentucky Wildcats. And they had some. I think their quarterback used to play at Georgia and transferred to Kentucky, and so there was some of that going on. But I feel like that in Georgia they have this idea that it doesn't matter who they're playing, they can just flip the switch and and they don't have to play hard for 4 quarters. And I think that if Kirby Smart does not run that idea out of their minds in the next 2 weeks, there's a good chance that they lose to that Alabama team. It's not a I won't say it's a world beating Alabama team. It's probably not the best Alabama team we've ever seen. But Kalen DeBoer came in and had a lot of guys transfer out because it wasn't Nick Saban anymore. And he had some guys come in and transfer from Washington and different places that he's been that have played for him or knew about him. And he's kind of built a team, and he's what you alluded to earlier. He's slowly building this confidence into him that I may not be Nick Saban, and this isn't Nick Saban's Alabama anymore, but I'm a good football coach, and I know X's and O's. And if you'll just follow me, I will lead you across the finish line. I mean, he did it at Washington, right? He completely rebuilt that Washington Huskies team and got him to a national title game. As an offensive coordinator, he did it at Indiana. That's where Michael Penix followed him from Indiana over to Washington. So he is a good football coach. And Kirby Smart's a great football coach, right? He's won 2 national titles. He's 42-0 in the regular season the last 3 years. You know, his only losses have been to Alabama in an SEC championship game in the last 3 years. So he's a great football coach, but I feel like that Georgia as a whole, right? Their program, their players, everybody have this air about them that oh, we just got to flip the switch in the second half and we'll be okay. And they're fixing to start getting into that gauntlet of real tough SEC games. They're going to have Alabama. They're going to have Texas in Austin. You know, these are all road games, and you just went to Lexington and almost lost. Alabama is a tougher place to play, and I promise you, Texas is a tougher place than Lexington, Kentucky to play. You know, so yeah, Kirby's got 2 weeks to get these boys whipped into shape, and he's really going to he's got his work cut out for him because I believe that there's a real reason to worry there in Athens.
It's human nature when you, like you said, you get to 42-0 in the regular season, and it's human nature. You just think you can flip that switch.
Right.
It's it's hard to do. It's hard to get them to. That's why I think that wake up call couldn't have come at a better time, because
Yeah.
yes, you got a lot of players on there that go, we're eventually going to keep it. Doesn't matter if it's halfway through the fourth quarter, if it's at halftime, coach will get us fired up. We got this. We're more talented than the team on the other side of the field, and we've got playmakers, and we typically have the better coach, and that's going to win us the game. If Kentucky could have just got the ball in the end zone once, they got a field goal every quarter, and the
Yeah.
defense was getting the ball back from Georgia. They just couldn't finish those third downs in crucial times to keep the drives going. They had to settle for those field goals.
Right.
It was really competitive. I didn't watch the first half, but I checked in at the score, and I thought, holy cow, what has happened? 6-3 at halftime. What is going on in Lexington? Is it
I did the same exact
the
thing.
wind blowing 50 miles an hour? What is
I I really thought it was just going to be a blowout, so I found a different game to watch, and then I looked down and it said 6-3 halftime, and I was like, oh, I might need to watch this game. This might be something we need to talk about.
for sure?
And it turns out it's exactly what it was, is something we need to talk about. The other thing that I look at is that preseason there was a lot of mock drafts and different things that had Carson Beck, the Georgia quarterback, is the first overall pick in the draft this coming year, and I don't know that I've seen anything from him
Absolutely.
that says first overall pick. I mean, I'd love for it. I think that'd be the first Jacksonville kid to ever go number one overall. I mean, I'd probably have to do some research to see if that's true or not, but um I feel like that sounds pretty true. I don't know that Jacksonville, Florida has ever had a number one overall pick. And so that would be cool, but I've not seen anything that says that he's top 5 yet, really.
Yeah, I don't think there's any way that the Panthers or the Patriots go out and draft Carson Beck as their number one savior.
No.
they're gonna go get an athlete. They're gonna get Cam Ward, a Jalen Milrow, that
Shador Sanders.
they're something,
Yeah.
big, athletic, some kid that they can change their futures. And yeah, I never saw the Carson Beck. I agree. I didn't get that.
Yeah, I didn't see.
Just because you're winning games, that's what those old Alabama quarterbacks used to do, right?
Right.
They have be up for the Heisman, winning percentage through the roof, but they're not an NFL quarterback. They're a
No.
game manager.
And and not to jump ahead to the NFL, but we're seeing that with the Carolina Panthers right now benching Bryce Young because yes, he was at Alabama, he won a lot of games, he won the Heisman Trophy, but he's not a real NFL quarterback. And we've seen that a lot throughout college, not just with Georgia, but in Alabama, but throughout college in general. You see a lot of good quarterbacks that are great in college, but their game just does not transfer to the NFL. I can win a lot of games against a couple of NFL guys, but I can't win any games against all NFL guys. And so I've not seen anything from him that says he should be a Heisman frontrunner. I've not seen anything from him that says that he should be the number one pick in the draft. So, but we have a lot of exciting things going on in college. How many games did you pick this week?
So I got 6 written down.
Okay.
I figure with my record being in the trash as it is, I got to pick more to get back to 500 because I'm 4-10 overall, which is trash.
Ouch.
If you guys would like and subscribe, you could pick against me and be winning some money right now. So there's a reason to tell your friends to pay attention to us. I got UNC -10 versus James Madison.
Okay. I like that.
Notre Dame -28 versus Miami, Ohio. I liked the Notre Dame game last year or last. I had it written down, and for some reason I just overlooked it, didn't say anything. But I just had a feeling they were going to roll. They were upset. You talk about coaching them up. They got
Yeah.
their wake up call against Northern Illinois, and they came out and just hammered Purdue. And I think they're going to do the same thing.
Yeah.
They are a talented team. They had their wake up call. They have got to run the table now. They know
Most
that,
definitely.
and I think
Especially without having a conference championship or playing in a conference. They have.
absolutely. I don't like the 4 touchdowns, but I really just think that they roll again. I think that that's
Yeah.
another 40 something to 10 game. SMU +2 versus TCU.
Okay. Just getting back on
I,
the SMU train.
yeah, I think that's just probably my pride picking that one. But Colorado State, I think they bounce back this week.
Okay.
-8.5 against UTEP. They're better than them, and they're again, it's one of those. You wake up, the team's coming back off that loss and just really showing that they're a good team. Tennessee -6, 6.5 versus Oklahoma, and then Boston College -6.5 versus Michigan State.
Okay. I like it.
So Ben,
So
take all the opposites on that now. I mean, the way it works, it's percentages, right? So
Right.
I was so trash last week that this week's got to bounce back. That's how the law of averages work. So
Well, I had a great week last week in our
yeah, you
picks.
do.
I went 3-0, which puts me at 6-3 for the season. So I actually put together a seven game parlay on Hard Rock Sports Bet. Obviously we're in Florida, so that's the only legal way for us to bet. And I'd picked 4 of those games off of here to put on our picks, but since you picked 6, I'll go ahead and pick 6 as well. I've got USC -4. I think that they're going to be way too much for Michigan. We're not looking at last year's Michigan. Jim Harbaugh's gone. All of that defense is gone. Wink Martindale's out of the NFL because he blitzes too much. uh Miller Moss is going to know the blitz is coming and he's going to be able to beat it. And Lincoln Riley's just an offensive genius, so he's going to have him prepared. Tennessee -6.5 against Oklahoma. We already discussed why I think that that's going to be a thing. I like Miami -17 against South Florida. They're just rolling everybody. Cam Ward is on a mission to win a Heisman Trophy, and so I'm going to take them. And I like Ole Miss -35.5 against Georgia Southern. It's another team that we really don't talk a lot about, because you never know how long are they for real. But for right now and against a way lesser opponent in Georgia Southern, I like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss to roll them and keep the points. And then I like Texas A&M -22.5 against Bowling Green. I think again they were up 20-0 at halftime on Florida last week, and they're playing a Bowling Green team that's a way less opponent. They should go through and just roll that one. And then I like Missouri -20 against Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt's coming to their house, and Vanderbilt's just not a good football team. They had, one good week where they rolled somebody, and then weeks 2 and 3 they went right back to their losing ways.
What
And
was that one again?
Missouri -20 over Vanderbilt.
Gotcha. Yep.
So hopefully those all work out.
Yeah, the Ole Miss. So you're not giving any appreciation of what Georgia Southern did to Vandy last week?
Yeah, no, I think Vandy and Ole Miss are two different opponents. If I'm not
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, I think Ole Miss has only allowed 1 touchdown all season. So their defense is actually playing really well.
Yeah, it seems like
Again,
they're quietly sitting at number 5. It seems like
right.
a very quiet number 5 in the nation, just dominating every week.
And I think that the reason that they're a quiet number 5, we haven't really talked about them. I haven't heard anybody nationally really talking about them, is because you never know how long Ole Miss is going to be for real for, right? They kind of always, the last few years since Lane Kiffin's been there, they've really started out the season hot. And then somewhere in the middle, something happens and they peter out. They get into a close game, into a hard situation, and they just kind of blow it at the end. And so I'm interested to see if Lane Kiffin can keep this going. If he can, I think we may be looking at like 6 or 8 teams from the SEC getting into the playoff.
We got 6 in the top 10 right now. So
Right. So it wouldn't surprise me if we end up with that, at least that many, half the playoff being SEC teams. And so again, against a lesser opponent, I'm not, what Georgia Southern did to Vanderbilt is not even on my radar because it's Vandy, right?
yeah, for sure.
But switching gears to the NFL for a second, and I kind of want to, I know we do a lot of talking about teams and who's surprising and who's this and who's that. I've been listening to a lot of national guys talk about this dynamic kickoff that we started with. And so I mentioned to you earlier in the week that there was something that I wanted to talk about because I'm under the impression that the NFL should just do away with the kickoff, right? We can figure out a 4th and 25 or a 4th and 15 from the 35 or something that allows you to do your onside kick, so to speak. But I was looking at some stats, and the only ones on NFL.com that are available right now are the stats from week 1 on this dynamic kickoff. So there were 172 kickoffs. Of those 172 in week 1, there was one onside kick. 111 of them went for touchbacks. There was only 57 return yards, and 3 of them landed out of bounds or outside the landing zone that they have, right? And the average starting field position was the 28-yard line. So your average starting field position before the dynamic kickoff was the 25 because everything was going out of the end zone. So I don't know that this thing's working the way that the NFL wants it to. As I'm watching these games, the majority of everybody is kicking it straight out of the back of the end zone still. Nobody cares about letting this team. I figured that maybe it would be some kind of strategic play where, all right, we're up big and we're not up big, it's a 1-score game and we're kicking off. We just took the lead. There's 2 minutes left in the 4th quarter. We're going to kick it inside this landing zone and go cover it well and get them bad field position. But even at the end of the games, the Cincinnati game, the Cincinnati and Kansas City game, Cincinnati scores, goes up by 3, has a chance to win the game, and they kick it right out of the back of the end zone and give Patrick Mahomes starting field position at his 30-yard line. And all he's got to do is drive 25 yards or so, and he's in Harrison Buckner's, range to kick a field goal. So I just feel like that this whole dynamic kickoff thing is a waste. Obviously, the rules committee meets every year, so it's something that could possibly go away come next year. But I don't think that it's worked out the way that the NFL wanted it to. The kickoff's not any more exciting than it was last year. If anything, it's just confusing trying to figure out what's going on and who can do what and when they can do it. And I think I saw one penalty last week for an offsides on the kicker because he went across the 50 before the guy caught the ball. So it was, I just don't know that it's worked out the way the NFL has wanted it to.
I'm still trying to figure it out. It's trying not to be too judgmental right off the bat. It's who was it that tried the onside kick? I missed that.
The Washington Commanders against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers week 1.
Oh, okay. I didn't know we'd had one of those. Okay, nice.
I didn't either because I'd already left the stadium before they tried the onside kick.
I did see something where someone kicked. So you have some kickers. I know Brandon Aubrey's trying this to have a strategy on the kickoff, which is to kick it in the corner, short, probably about right at the 5 yards inside the end zone. Because if the ball lands in the end zone, they get it at the 20.
Oh, okay.
So if it hits in the end zone. So there is, and we've been trying that, but that's a tough kick, right? Because if you kick it straight, there's a guy there, 2 guys that they have back that they're going to field it. So you've got to find that angle and try to drop it in. If you're trying that, you can kick it out of bounds. Obviously, if you kick it in the landing zone, they've got a chance to return it or get past the 30. But I think that's something I've seen us try as Cowboys to try to kick it, make it land in the end zone. It's dead. It's at the 20.
Yeah.
Other than that, though, you're right. The safe play is just kick it out of the back of the end zone, give it to him at the 30, and then so we'll see. He's still filling it out. It's new, like most new stuff. I don't want to be the guy that says, get off my yard, get off my grass yet. So I'm trying to give it a little time. It's definitely different. We'll see. These coaches will figure something out. I hope. There'll be more strategies coming. Maybe they start line drive kicking it.
Maybe.
To try to get it in the end zone and get them at the 20, but we'll see.
Yeah, and I don't want to be the get off my lawn guy either. In all honesty, I was hoping that it was going to create more kickoff returns, right? I miss the days of Devin Hester's and Cordell Pattersons and all of that, getting an opportunity
For
to
sure.
completely change a game and flip momentum in the, 10 or 12 seconds it takes them to run 100
And
yards.
I think coaches and people across the board are just okay with getting rid of those collisions, and you don't get guys hurt.
Right.
You have less guys, going and having car wrecks on kickoffs, and so I think that everybody's okay with kicking it. You can kick it out of the back end zone. Let's go. Let's take
Yep.
that return out of the game we don't have to worry about that. We get no one injured, and
Right.
let's just play defense.
So, which brings me to the point was that if it's all about safety and trying to eliminate those collisions, and the coaches don't care where your starting field position is, because
Why are we
that's
even doing
obvious,
it?
right?
Right.
So when and where do we do everybody starts at the 25-yard line, starts at your own 25-yard line, and if you want to do an onside kick, we figure out something, whether it's a 4th and 25 from your own 35 or a 4th and 20 from your own 30, or whatever the case may be, that says you have one play, draw up your best play if you want to keep the ball.
Well, I think if you got what DJ Dallas had that return where he took it to the house, you have that guy does that return once every 3 weeks, and it's like, oh, it works. See, it works.
Yeah.
So if they keep having that sprinkle of someone taking it to the house or someone breaking it across the 50,
Yeah.
that's going to keep it in the game. If everybody goes to just saying, but at the same time, if you get that sprinkle of people going to the house, then everybody's going to kick it out of the back of the end zone because you can't afford that. So we'll see how that plays out.
Yes, we will. So you had an interesting point when we were doing our little pre-talk before we jump on here and actually start recording, wanting to talk about the 4 NFC teams that fell this week. Our 4 top tier NFC teams that fell this week.
Oh, absolutely. So we talked last week about, you said the upper echelon was the Niners and the Lions. Totally agree. And I
Correct.
threw in the Eagles and Cowboys. I think those are the 4 teams that are primed to handle business, win their divisions. The Eagles and Cowboys are going to be right there battling it out, and are just better than everybody else in the NFC. And then boom, they all 4 lose last
Right.
week. They all 4 got handled. The Eagles didn't get handled, but they lost, a home game they shouldn't have lost. So that was the one off. But the Niners are decimated with injuries, so they, couldn't beat the Vikings.
Right.
The Lions got handled by the Bucks.
They did.
And both of those teams now, you talk about the Vikings and the Bucks are 2-0.
Right.
So, beat by good teams. Cowboys again beat by another 2-0 team, manhandled by the Saints, who look like the
Right.
class of the NFC right now. And yeah, those 4 teams all take a loss the weekend after I pronounce them the 4, add to your 2 and make it a 4-team NFC powerhouse. They all go down. And they all go down, 3 of them go down to 2-0 teams. So
Right. So I find it interesting, and I brought this point up when we were talking earlier, is that of those 4 teams that lost, the only one that I really still feel confident about being an upper echelon team is the Detroit Lions, right? Everybody's allowed to have a bad game. Jared Goff had a bad game, threw 2 interceptions. The defense had 5 sacks in that game. Aiden Hutchinson had 5 sacks in that game, and they still managed to lose. I think Ben Johnson maybe tried to just get a little too cute on the offensive side of the ball and didn't play their game. And so I really feel like you're allowed to have a bad game, even if you're a top tier team. And I think Detroit just had a bad game. San Francisco worries me because of their injuries, right? You've got Deebo Samuel's out, Christian McCaffrey's out. Now you got George Kittle's suffering a hamstring injury. He's doubtful for this week. You've got Ward on the back end playing corners hurt. Nick Bosa's got some kind of abdominal or pec strain or something. He's questionable. So these injuries in San Francisco are starting to mount up. And I don't know, this right now is the time where Brock Purdy gets to earn every dollar that he's going to want to have at the end of this season, right? He's up for his extension at the end of the season. And this is where he's going to earn that money, is not having all of his weapons available and having to go out and lead this team to a victory without all of his chess pieces. That's
Yeah, what
also
a
where,
difference a week makes, because it was, look what how much talent we have minus Christian McCaffrey to
right.
1 week later. Wow. Now you're seeing the injuries across the board, and it's like, okay, so now our talent level has been brought back to league average. And you're right,
Right.
it's Brock Purdy's going to be way more on his shoulders than he's ever had.
And then Philadelphia concerns me as well because they had zero pressure on Kirk Cousins the entire game. He was allowed to. You have a guy that's coming off of an Achilles injury that in week one looked like he couldn't move to save his life, and you bring zero pressure. The game winning drive that he had, right? He had a clean pocket the whole time. There wasn't
Clean pocket
there
and
wasn't
got
an
wide open.
right. There wasn't an eagle around him.
You weren't getting
It's
pressure on him, and you also weren't covering anybody.
anybody. So I'm really concerned about the Eagles defense and the Eagles in general. I don't know that this offensive scheme that Kellen Moore's running over there is, I don't know that anybody's just quite comfortable. And I heard this stat on Colin Cowherd the other day, is that Jalen Hurts' winning percentage and completion percentage without AJ Brown on the team or playing is the same as Justin Fields while he was in Chicago.
Ouch.
Right. And AJ Brown is out again this week. He was obviously out last week. And Colin was talking about most valuable player, right? Most valuable player that's not a quarterback. And he had this surprising one. And he mentioned it being AJ Brown because of this drop off in Jalen Hurts' game compared to since they've had AJ Brown and when AJ Brown's not available to play for him. His completion percentage and his winning percentage is the same as Justin Fields in Chicago. And that's not a good stat to have. And then I'm also concerned about the Cowboys. Not really. Obviously, being a Commanders fan, it's the one team that I always root for them to lose. But in a general sense of being non-biased and just talking sports, Micah Parsons was on a milk carton last week. He was nowhere to be found. CD Lamb might
So was 10 other guys that were lined up with him.
correct.
That whole defense just took the day off.
Right. And so you look at the Cowboys and they spent zero money in free agency, right? They re-signed CD to a huge deal. They re-signed Dak to a huge deal. You've got Micah's deal coming up. You just paid Diggs a bunch of money 2 years ago. And so now the funds are starting to run short. The salary cap is very top heavy over in Dallas, and you don't have the supporting players around Dak Prescott other than CD. You don't have the supporting players around Micah and Diggs. Deron Bland's going to come back from injury halfway through the season, and that's going to help a little bit.
Deron Bland doesn't help you stop the run.
No,
and that's our problem.
correct. And so I'm concerned there in the sense that the Cowboys are not built to actually win. And I heard somebody else talking about this, was that Brent Kubiak is the new offensive coordinator in New Orleans, Gary Kubiak's son. And he comes out of that Shanahan coaching tree. And it's the same Shanahan coaching tree that they run over in Green Bay, who put it to the Cowboys.
Absolutely. And that's
Right.
who dominates us. That run, smash you in the mouth, hit the tight ends, guys
Right.
running open, play action. That absolutely. It's the biggest fear.
And the half of the NFC, half of the conference that the Cowboys play in, half of the teams in that conference run that same system. So it's real concerning when that seems to be the system that you can't stop, and half of all of the teams that are doing anything in the conference run that same system. It gets real concerning about how far can this team really go. Mike Zimmer coming in as the defensive coordinator, it does not look like anything's changed as far as their ability to stop the run. And of course, if you can't stop the run, it doesn't matter how good your corners are. the running game always opens up the passing game, and it was on full effect last week against the Saints.
Absolutely. Looked, it was deja vu of that the Green Bay and LaFleur, that playoff game at
Right.
home. Where's a place at Dallas that we've dominated, and it was deja vu. Could not stop the opponent, and we were kicking field goals where they were scoring touchdowns, and
Yeah.
that got us behind, and then it was over. Luckily, Baltimore this week is not that system, so I'm hoping for a bounce back.
No,
They'll
but
Mar's going to do his thing, but we won't. It won't be at all that type of scheme that we can handle.
right.
Uh, so we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was disappointing. Just
Well, and
because,
Lamar Jackson is 20-1 against NFC teams.
yeah, he is.
So it's but the truth is it's going to be a good game. It's going to be one that I tune into for the simple fact that we have an 0-2 Baltimore Ravens team that needs a win, and we have a 1-1 Dallas Cowboys team that needs a win. Like you have to have a win after getting trounced that bad at your house, your home opener. You have to come back and have a win. Like for confidence of the team, you have to come back and have a win. So it'll be an interesting game to watch. You talked about that a lot of the teams that we had in the upper echelon of the NFC had lost to 2-0 teams. And so I kind of swung this way with the topic was we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have 8 0-2 teams in the NFL. We have 9 2-0 teams in the NFL. So I kind of wanted to go with the who's the best 0-2 team and who is the worst 2-0 team. And I think I sent you that list over. So
Do you want to know who the best 0-2 team is?
yeah, who's your best 0-2 team?
Worst 0-2, I think that's easy. That's Pittsburgh.
Okay, Pittsburgh's the worst 2-0 team. Yes.
Yep,
I
absolutely.
agree with that. They
Not think too hard on that one. I think
no,
they and look at them, they're fortunate enough that their two rivals are 0-2, Cincinnati
right.
and Baltimore are. So, good start for them, but I think that they will come back to earth. I don't,
Yeah.
because even if Justin Fields, if he slowly improves, the whole Russell Wilson thing, I just don't see them being a double-digit win team, even with a good start. So the worst or the best 0-2 team, looking at this list, man, is it Carolina Panthers? Just making sure you're paying attention. You're a little slow on that laugh right there. I was just
Yeah, I
checking.
was like, I'm
Just checking
looking,
with you.
and
You're
I
like, did
actually,
he just say the Carolina Panthers? No.
yeah,
When the year is over with, I think it's those two that Cincinnati, Baltimore, man, Baltimore. I'm gonna say Baltimore.
okay,
Which is great. Doesn't look good for this weekend, but
yeah, no, and I not that I can argue with you on Baltimore, but I chose Cincinnati. One, T. Higgins has been hurt for their first 2 games, right, and they get him back this week against my Commanders. And then they completely dominated Kansas City last week. They outplayed Kansas City through and through. They have the perfect defensive scheme for Patrick Mahomes, and a late penalty for pass interference is what puts them in puts Kansas City in field goal range to win that game. And then the stat that I gave to you earlier is that Joe Burrow is 1-9 in his first 2 games of the season every year. Since he's been the starter, he's 1-9 in games 1 and 2. They were actually 0-2 the year that he went to the Super Bowl. So I think this is a team that is generally a slow starter. Whereas the only time that Lamar Jackson's been 0-2, they didn't even end the season with a winning record. So I look at Cincinnati as the best 0-2 team only because they're here all the time. They're used to being 0-2. They know how to get it back together. They've got most of their pieces are still available to them. They haven't been riddled with free agency and salary cap losses as of yet. That's coming. You know, their window on that is closing very quickly. You know, T. Higgins won't be there next year. They're not going to franchise him again. I don't know what's going to happen with Jamar Chase because he's super upset about his contract situation. But I think for this year, where we're at right now, and who Cincinnati is and what they've been over the last few years, I find them as the best 0-2 team.
I got a question for you. Out of the 2-0 teams,
Uh-huh.
anybody on that list you see having a year where they go 14 wins?
No, I don't know that I trust Kansas City right now. They're kind of getting depleted with injuries, and Patrick Mahomes hasn't looked like the same Patrick Mahomes for the last couple of years. And Travis Kelce's been absolutely absent for the first 2 games of this season. I don't know how much I trust Sam Darnold in Minnesota. Houston and Buffalo might be the only 2 teams that I could even consider winning 14 games.
Houston was one I was just thinking about that, and then I would say New Orleans is to be determined.
Correct.
Obviously, if they, the way they looked the first 2 weeks, if they can continue that, my goodness, watch out, league.
Look,
And
I'm
then
telling
Houston,
you, Devontae Adams has to be physically sick, like to his
just
stomach,
Derek Carr,
puking every day, watching what Derek Carr is doing in New Orleans right now.
for sure.
Like, I mean, think about it. He stares across his locker room and sees Mustache Minshew, and then looks at the scoreboard and sees Derek Carr putting up MVP numbers.
Scoring on every possession.
The number one quarterback in fantasy football right now is Derek Carr. Who thought you would ever say that?
Playing a video game out there. He's scoring every time he gets the ball.
Yes.
Have you watched Receiver on Netflix?
Yes, I did watch Receiver on Netflix.
I think I just finished episode 3, so that's great. Speaking of Devontae Adams and seeing
Yeah.
what he went through last year, it's just interesting,
Yeah.
right? He's a dog, and he just they can't get him the ball sometimes, and
Right.
he's going to be
Yeah.
going through that because
Well, and to think that as an athlete, right, I've kind of forced myself out of this well-run organization that I know is going to be competing every year, right? They may not make it every year, but Green Bay is always competing. They are one of the best run organizations in all of the NFL. Yeah. And I leave a Hall of Famer because I want to go play with my high school or my old college quarterback, right? Yeah. We had such a great rapport when I was in college. That's what I want to do is I want to finish my career up there with him. And he doesn't even make it through the first season of Devontae Adams being there, and they can't get him out of there and trade him. He goes down to New Orleans, and last year I really thought Derek Carr was about to be done. I thought New Orleans needed a quarterback. And
I agree. I thought that was going to be a great pickup. Going to New Orleans, I thought, oh wow, here come the Saints again, and then it just never that never materialized of anything. There was nothing last year that showed you that they were what they're doing.
Right. I mean, nobody that I've heard talk about the Saints before the season. No,
they didn't have any personnel. They just added coaching.
Correct. Yeah, they went out and got a new offensive coordinator in Clint Kubiak, and I heard somebody on the radio say he's not allowing Derek Carr to dink and dunk. He's making Derek Carr throw it down the field. He's not having any. There's just not people around the line of scrimmage for Derek Carr to take his 4 or 5 yard, shot. And no, we're gonna throw it down the field. We're gonna run the ball, and we're gonna push it. And Derek Carr is thriving right now, and Devontae Adams has got to be sick.
And I can see that I didn't know that about Brady, but I can see that in Kamara's fantasy points that he's getting. He used to be the PPR guy.
Right.
He was going to get you almost double-digit catches out of the backfield, and now he's getting his yards on rushing and touchdowns. And it's just 2 weeks, but he was always going to get you 8 catches. And now he's getting you 8 yards a carry. So
and it's that Shanahan system, right? That zone running system that they have. I don't know. I mean, you go all the way back to Mike Shanahan, Kyle's father, and what he was able to do with all of those running backs in Denver, and what he was able to do with Clinton Portis in Washington, and it's been the same system, and it works. Nobody's figured out how to stop it yet. Terrell Davis became a Hall of Famer off of it. And there were many running backs after Terrell Davis that that nobody knew about that all of a sudden became household names because they ran behind that system. And so I think New Orleans is here to stay as long as Derek Carr can keep playing within the offense that he's given. If he keeps following the instructions that he's given, he'll be all right. And I think New Orleans will be a surprise team this year, which I have them as one of my biggest surprises so far in this season is New Orleans and Minnesota. I really thought Minnesota would be cooked with Sam Darnold. Um, Kevin O'Connell over there, the head coach of Minnesota, has got to be a quarterback whisperer because Sam Darnold was cooked. His career was over. He was, relegated to career backup. And we talked about Derek Carr being number one in fantasy. Who thought we'd ever say that? Derek Carr is number 6 in the fantasy rankings of quarterbacks right now. Granted, it's Sam Darnold.
Yeah.
The same Sam Darnold we were watching, Sports Center clips of a few years ago saying, I see ghosts on Monday Night Football against the Patriots, right? This Sam Darnold is the number 6 ranked quarterback in fantasy football. So, and that's without Jordan Addison, who's still out with an ankle injury. And that's without TJ Hawkinson, who's still on the PUP list after tearing his ACL last year. So he's going to get 2 more weapons added to the Justin Jefferson train. And he's already rolling right now. So if he can keep this going, it could completely revive his career. The future in Minnesota is JJ McCarthy. They drafted him in the top 10. That's who they're going to roll with. But Sam Darnold could see a resurgence in his career and maybe find a spot where somebody doesn't have a high draft pick, but we need a quarterback. We've seen what you did. So we can get somebody out of that coaching tree that's going to run that same system and bring you over here. And maybe we can keep your career moving in an upward trajectory.
Absolutely. He's in, why the reason everyone thought JJ McCarthy would be successful because he was going to a great roster.
Correct.
Good coaching staff, good system. And Sam Darnold's the beneficiary of that system and that team right now. That's why we thought a rookie quarterback could go in and be successful. And, he's grown up a little bit. I'm happy to see him doing well. You hope every bad situation going to the Jets. A lot of guys go to these teams, and Bryce Young's an example. Who knows? Hopefully he gets another shot somewhere. But that's a terrible situation. It's just a bad team, and it's good to see him with great raw. He's throwing to Justin Jefferson.
97 yard touchdown pass last week to Justin Jefferson.
Congratulations, you fantasy guys out there that had that guy. Because now I'm guaranteeing nobody had Sam Darnold, but they do now.
Nobody. I picked up Sam Darnold. I was trying to pick up Derek Carr too, and somebody else snaked him from me. So but yeah, no, I did pick up Sam Darnold. And speaking of fantasy, I had Dak Prescott as my starting quarterback, and through 2 weeks, he has just not been able to do it. I think he had 9 points week 1 and he had 13 points last week, and it just, Dak's usually, at least in the regular season, right? He's had his playoff woes.
He started slow last year as well. We had blowout wins against the Giants and the Jets early, but those were such blowouts. Defense was scoring touchdowns and we were running the ball, and then we were taking the foot off the gas pedal. But, he started slow last year. I think, in our fantasy league, is the one I'm in with you. You dropped Dak, and I immediately picked him up or didn't pick him up. He's on my waiver wire. I'm trying. So,
I tried to pick him back up because he dropped off at the same. So I had Will Levis and Dak Prescott. I'd picked up Will Levis as my second quarterback, just curious to see what he would do in that Callahan system coming from Cincinnati, where they toss the ball around a lot. And he just makes dumb mistakes and loses any fantasy momentum he has going. He loses immediately with some dumb interception or fumble or something. So I was dropping him to get Derek Carr, and I was dropping Dak Prescott to get Sam Darnold, and I was going to make those my 2 quarterbacks. Somebody else snaked Derek Carr, so Dak Prescott fell off. And when I didn't get Derek Carr and only had Sam Darnold, I went back to try to pick up Dak. So we'll see how the waiver wire
Well,
clears.
you'll get him because I'm in first place. I get the bottom.
Okay.
I get the last waiver every week. So because of my greatness, unfortunately, I will have your
Yeah.
guy that you dropped back.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been having a rough fantasy year. I mean, I won my matchup last week, so I'm 1-1, but I got Debo Samuel's hurt. Now Joe Mixon's questionable with an ankle injury. He left the game halfway through the game last Sunday night. I squeaked by with a win. It was not pretty. So
So
and
NFL
I've been
injuries, that's a great point. NFL injuries are on my list. That's something that's just been crazy. I was making a list this morning and it got to where I ran out of time. I mean, it's a huge list here of just
yeah,
name after name of stars.
right.
And it's it's insane that I don't know if it's something where obviously the older generation and everyone would say like it was a rougher game and they played through more, but I think that's true. People played through a bicep bruise, people played through maybe a high ankle sprain a little more. Now, guys, it's completely business. If they're not at 100%, if they're not at 90%, and they're being told to sit out, they're not letting them get out there
Correct.
and they're using the backup. Um, so a lot more guys getting used on the rosters, a lot more,
Well, these guys are making way more money than what they were back in the day, right? You've got, let's take Justin Jefferson, for example, right? He's got a quad injury. He says he's playing. Who knows what Minnesota does? They just paid the man 30, they're paying him $35 million a year, is what his annual average salary is. Do you think that they want to take the chance of him tearing his quad muscle because he decides to play through it and now they're out all this money? I think the
not in
uptick
week
in
three, right?
not in
Not in
week
week.
no, not in week 3. No, I don't need you in, like, I can lose week 3 and still be okay in the playoff hunt. If we're playing in the Super Bowl, yeah, I gotta have you. If you can muscle through it, I gotta have you. But I think the uptick in injuries is we have less preseason games and we have less starters that are playing in the preseason, right? So these guys' bodies, they're not hitting in practice the way they're hitting in the game. They're not hitting quarterbacks at all, right? We look at, Tua's out with a concussion. Quarterbacks have never been hit though, so that's kind of a mute point. But inside of training camp, inside of these practices, they're not hitting the same way that they hit in the game. So a lot of these guys are not getting real game time action until game 1 of the season. And so the muscle memory, the toughness, the getting a bruise and having it heal and then getting hit in that same spot, you don't bruise as easy. Your body's figured out that that's not as bad, or whatever the case may be. The tightness in the ligaments and hamstrings and calves and all of this is coming from not having that game time reps, I think. And as we continue to push forward and look for an 18 game season, they're going to look to get rid of the preseason altogether. And what are our injury rate going to look like then? We talk about trying to make the game safer, trying to get rid of some of these injuries and hard hits and stuff. And I think until these guys realize, oh, the preseason is not important because I need to learn the playbook that I already know. It's important because I need that game. Kirk Cousins was talking about that after his week 1 loss to Pittsburgh and the win there in Philadelphia on Monday night, was talking about that, with not playing in the preseason and only having training camp reps, the rust was real for him. He hadn't played a real game since week 8 of last year, and trying to get back into the rhythm and new players and new coaches and a new system and not having had any real game time action. He says, the phone booth that I have to play within is a lot smaller in practice than what it is, or I mean, a lot bigger in practice than what it is in the game. That phone booth gets a lot smaller. The amount of room that I have to move around gets a lot smaller. And so having to realize that in a game time situation, that's not the best place to realize that. And so I think a lot of our injuries and things in the slow offense and all of that's that's come to fruition at the beginning of this season has a lot to do with the lack of preseason play.
Agreed, agree. It's a great transition into another point of mine is that Kirk Cousins. It was so good seeing him and Aaron Rodgers perform
Yeah,
well week
yeah,
two
for sure.
because they didn't look like that week one.
No.
They might have been seeing ghosts. You know, there was a stat where Aaron Rodgers didn't make a pass to the right side of the football field
Yeah,
because he didn't trust his left tackle. Kirk Cousins looked like he was washed.
yeah,
He couldn't move. And then both those guys bounce back week two and get a W.
yeah,
Look good doing it. You could see Kirk Cousins as the game progressed, getting more comfortable moving. And then Aaron Rodgers was rolling out and just slinging that thing.
yeah. Well, and
Thursday night.
then yeah, Thursday night. Oh yeah, yeah. He looked a lot better week two against Tennessee, and then he looked
Great.
like or almost like Aaron Rodgers of
I mean,
old
hitting
again.
guys where they were catching the ball right in the pocket where they're going upfield, avoiding the hits coming from the defense, putting the ball right
Yeah.
on them. He looked amazing Thursday night against the Patriots.
Yes, he did. And granted, the Patriots are a, a team void of talent, but they are still an NFL team. And who knows, even if that is the case, right? They're just that bad. What Aaron Rodgers was able to do was get comfortable, right? He was able to get comfortable inside the system. He's able to get comfortable behind that offensive line, and he was able to get comfortable moving around, which is
And
something we hadn't really seen.
the fans made him more comfortable.
Yeah.
They're chanting Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah.
Talk about getting comfortable. Man, the Jets fans have been waiting for something like this, and they
Yes.
thought last year was it. Boom, 4 plays later, season over, and that now they're chanting his name. He's out there rolling out, swinging it sidearm, flicking
Yeah.
that wrist, and looking like the old Aaron Rodgers. And it was good to see. Glad to see him and Kirk, come back because it feels better when your quarterbacks are out there performing and you got the elite guys. We don't want to see the Carolina Panther situation. We don't want that to happen.
No.
Right? It's just no fun for anybody.
No. And speaking of Bryce Young, um, he's I've seen all kinds of different reports and articles about how pissed he is that he got benched, rightfully so. It's I don't know that I ever felt like Bryce Young was going to be a world beater quarterback, right? He's small, he's got small hands, he's short. I I wasn't sure what he was going to be in the NFL to begin with. But to go to a team like Carolina and given zero opportunity to succeed, there's no offensive line, there is no running game, there's no wide receiver to speak of. They went out and traded for Deontay Johnson, but I mean, you really don't have. You're completely void of talent team. We talked about the New England Patriots being void of talent. There is no talent. They traded away Brian Burns, Derek Brown, their best defensive tackle, tears his MCL. He's out for the season. So on the defensive side of the ball, you really have zero talent now. And then on the offensive side of the ball, he just doesn't have the scheme's bad, the blocking's bad, everything's bad. And then you bench the kid and act like it's his fault. And it pains me to see, right? We've seen it with the New York Jets in the past. They've done the same thing. We talked about it earlier with Sam Darnold. These bad franchises that draft these guys and then expect them to without giving them any help, expect them to completely change the face of their franchise. And then when they don't, because you haven't done anything to help them out, you bench them and talk about what a bust they are. And I just
Absolutely.
don't know.
He's in a terrible situation, and he's also it's not helping that his counterpart that he's going to always be compared to CJ Stroud
Right.
is doing what he's doing, and that comparison is like, well, look what CJ Stroud's doing now. CJ Stroud's in a great situation.
Right.
Houston killed the draft. They got Will Anderson Jr. and CJ Stroud, and just add to a good defense and an offense that had weapons. They're continuing to add weapons. They go get Diggs. We're a playoff team last year, and here's CJ Stroud handling business, and here's Bryce Young picked at number
Right.
one, and complete different situations, but he's taken the downfall of that.
Most definitely. And you mentioned it earlier. I really do hope that he gets another chance. I'd like to see him get into an offensive system that's able to scheme for what his skill set is. I look at him and Tua Tagovailoa. Uh, I just murdered his name, but I look at him and Tua, right? And they're similar in size, they're similar in stature, and they're similar in skill set. If you could get Bryce Young into a Mike McDonald style off or Mike McDaniel style offense, then you have an opportunity for him to succeed, right? I don't need you to throw it deep a lot because you can't really see over the defensive line, but we need to get you getting the ball to playmakers on short, quick throws, get them in space and let them go and make a play. So yeah, I heard that he said he's open to a trade, and there's some people out there that might be some suitors, and so I really hope he gets an opportunity to get out of Carolina, and I know it's only year 2 for him, but he needs a restart on his career already, because where he's at is not it. And it's not like that any quarterback that they go and draft, they're going to be in the top 5 of the draft next year, primed and ready to pick another one of these quarterbacks, and it's not going to be any different until the owner David Tepper makes a legitimate, concise decision to build that roster. It's going to be useless for him to draft a quarterback.
Absolutely.
It's
It's
going to be a
hard.
ruining
It's
anybody's
hard for
career.
these quarterbacks to come in, right? None of the rookies currently have a passing touchdown through 2 weeks.
Correct. Right.
Caleb Williams, who everyone said number one consensus number one pick, going to a great roster. There's not anybody out there, I think, that didn't agree with that's a
Right.
great roster.
Yeah.
Weapons, defense, legit. Adding weapons. Keenan Allen comes over. They draft Odunze.
Yeah.
They've got
They
DeAndre
built
Swift,
right. They built that team to bring Caleb to. Like,
and they bring the guy that's the consensus number one, and he can't throw a touchdown. They're struggling, can't barely get 150 yards a game.
right.
It's hard. Being an NFL quarterback is hard, and this
Yes.
guy has weapons.
Yeah.
Bryce Young doesn't have the support either side of the ball,
Correct.
and so it is difficult. I couldn't do it. I could never played football, but I definitely couldn't have played quarterback in the NFL. That's for sure.
No, most definitely not. And so when I talk about somebody being bad at football, I don't do it based compared on me, right? Because I played 1 year of Pee Wee League, and my parents wouldn't never let me play again because I just didn't have the grades or behavior or whatever the case was to be able to constitute having that privilege of playing football. And so I don't ever compare anybody to me. I just look at what I see compared to the rest of what's going on, And the Panthers are bad at football. They're bad from the top down, right? When we talk about organizations that are always going to be there, it's not always because they have the most talented players. They're just good organizations that put the right people in the right places. We talked about, Green Bay earlier. San Francisco is one of them. You take a quarterback number 3 overall, it turns out that he's not very good. And a year later, you take a guy with the very last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant, but because of the organization and the way we've built this team, Mr. Irrelevant can take this team to the Super Bowl, right? And so organizationally, the Panthers are horrible. And it's, and the Bears have been another one of those teams that organizationally they have been bad for a long time, been riding the coattails of the 1985 Super Bowl forever. And they've just been a bad organization. My Washington Commanders, under Dan Snyder, we were a horrible organization. He bought the team in 1998 and completely ran the whole franchise into the ground. We could never get quarterback right. We could never get his first few years. He was playing fantasy football with old players, right? Bringing in Bruce Smith and Deion Sanders at the end of their careers and trying to figure something out. We'd have talented teams or talented players or a decent coach, and somehow he would meddle in all of that and blow it all up before it ever really had a chance to get started. And so organizationally, they need a new identity, right? Whether it's a new owner or somebody to get in David Tepper's ear and tell him it's time for you to sit out and just let the people that know football do football, because you are ruining people's careers here.
Absolutely.
So Who do you have this week for your picks in the NFL?
All right, guys, who to pick against? Let me give them to you. Colts -1 versus the Bears. Saints -2.5 versus the Eagles. Bucks -6.5 versus the Broncos, and the Cardinals, Arizona +3 against the Lions.
Ooh. So I like the New Orleans pick. I have New Orleans -2.5 as well over Philadelphia. I like the Seattle Seahawks -4.5 over the Miami Dolphins. No Tua. Skylar Thompson coming into Seattle with the 12th man. I like Las Vegas -5.5 over the Panthers. They may have a new quarterback, but they have all of the same other pieces. And Andy Dalton is not better than Bryce Young.
No
I got
faith
the
in the Red Rifle.
no faith in the Red Rifle. I have the Giants +6.5 over, well, +6.5 against the Browns. I just don't think the Browns are that good, and they have a lot of injuries. So those were the four that I picked. I think you ended up picking six, didn't you?
No, I picked four. No,
Oh,
I
you
gave you.
did pick four? Okay.
Look at us, and we didn't even plan that.
No, no, we didn't. So yeah, that's who I like this week. I went 2-2 last week on our picks. The one that you said you were going to keep texting me about that we had the same. I think I heard from you once. So
I didn't know. Did we? I forget what happened in that
oh
game.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All of a sudden, case of amnesia, right?
Yeah, I did not. Let's see. I was 0-3. Again, I was 0-3 in college, and I was 0-3 with one push in the NFL. So again,
Oh.
puts my record at 4-10. I'm owning it. It's last week. That's what happens. I was 4-4, and you go an 0-6 on a weekend with a
Yeah,
push. We end up 4-10. So
right.
looking to bounce back with six. I got 10 picks this week. So let's go.
Got to get Allen back to his winning ways. As long as he stays away from picking the Cowboys, he ought to be all right.
Yeah, didn't touch that this week. Didn't touch that this week.
um, yeah, speaking of picks, my Commanders are atop the division right now, sitting at 1-1 with the 1-0 in the division, so that gives us the edge. So
Yeah,
that'll
you guys.
probably
That was impressive getting a victory against the Giants with no kicker.
yeah,
So
and
I found
without
out what
and
happened to
without
the kicker
scoring a touchdown, offensive
without scoring a
touchdown.
touchdown. So the kicker pulled a hammy or something on the opening kickoff. And then they brought out their punter on their first touchdown. He missed the extra point. And so that's why they didn't try another kick the rest of the game.
Wow. And all they would have needed was one field goal.
Only the Giants. My
Right.
barber is a huge Giants fan, and I got a haircut.
Okay.
I got a haircut on Thursday, and I was like, "Dude, how do you guys not have a kicker on your roster?" And he's like, "Man, he's like, we even had extra roster spots available that week. They didn't even have the
Oh,
full 53-man roster, and they didn't have an extra kicker." And I'm like,
how
"That's
do you go
giant."
into a game without a full 53 man? Like who
I
leaves
know.
open roster spots?
Who does? The Giants? I mean, that's something I used to say about the Commanders. Like, oh, that's
Yeah,
why I just to be in Washington. But the
right.
Giants are too. I don't know what they're doing. They
Look, Joe Shane over there, the general manager, this is it for him. He's done. I really hope Brian Daboll gets to stay because I think Brian Daboll is a really good, really, really good coach. But a lot of times, you hire a coach and a GM at the same time. When one leaves, the other one goes with him.
yeah.
And so I think Joe Shane's gone, so it probably means Brian Dayball's gone. Um, but he hasn't been given anything to work with. Saquon Barkley was the best weapon he had on offense to work with, and Joe let him walk to the Eagles, and paid Daniel Jones instead. So that's funny that they had open roster spots and didn't even have a kicker.
Didn't have a kicker.
So
And and I'm sure that every team practices this, right? That punter had probably shown them in practice, I'm capable of making an extra point, maybe not a 40-yard field goal.
right,
And he goes out there and the nerves get to him and he, misses that first one and then they don't give him another shot. So
yeah.
freaking Giants.
Well, I think that'll wrap it up for this week.
Yeah,
We
good luck to you
appreciate you
guys this
guys.
week.
Appreciate you guys tuning in. Again, if you could hit the like and subscribe, Share it with your friends. Help us get some recognition out here. Let us keep having fun. With that, the Star Command is out.